Those that were slightly late for the Ringy World meeting or weren't here, the evacuation signal in the Professor Stuart Hall building, which is this, is in the form of audible sirens and flashing beacons in certain areas. If the alarm makes a continuous sound, please make your way to the exit nearest to you in an orderly fashion, lining out from each end of the row. I'll slightly alter what Nigel said this morning. Your closest exit may be behind you. So, in addition to the front exits, emergency exits are situated at the back of the theatre and they are clearly signed. Please use all exits in an emergency, but do not use any lifts. Once outside, please assemble on the backfield outside this building. Please do not re-enter any building until told that it is safe to do so by a member of the fire brigade or Goldsmiths college staff. If you should require first aid at all, not just if the fire alarm goes off, please contact a member of Goldsmiths staff or the welcome desk, which is just outside here, who will be able to offer assistance. Toilets are located in the western atrium. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And also a logistical note, some people might not have realised that you do have a fold-out table there at each seat. So if you're balancing papers on your knees, you don't need to. A perfectly good folding table, just like being back in school. And with that... and with that, I would like to invite Robert Perry to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon us as we meet here in Council today. As we are mindful of all those whom we represent, grant us all generosity of spirit, care in listening, and moderation in speaking. We thank you for the pleasure which we all gain from ringing, and we ask that all that we do today and all the decisions which we take will be in the best interests of our art. We make this prayer through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Robert. You'll see that we've spread out a little bit on this table here, so myself, Mary, Andy and David, but I'll invite the other trustees just to stand and wave from where they're sitting. So Alison Everett, Philip Barnes, David Smith, there we are, and
Clyde Whitaker.
Clyde's outside. Oh, there you are. There we are. Terrific. Thank you very much. And the workgroup leads are also here as well, and you'll be, well, I'm sure you've met them all anyway. Louise Nightingale, Alison Hodge, Doug Hurd, Tim Hine. Who have I missed? There we are. Graham John, hiding over there. Thank you, Graham. Okay. Terrific. Okay. All right, do you want me to mention about... Okay, yeah. So just a little pedantic point about guild affiliations. We're coming to item 2. We don't have any applications to affiliate, so that's a quick item, isn't it? But for those guilds who are affiliated, just a gentle reminder, please, to ensure that affiliation fees are received in time, because it can compromise your ability to speak and vote at this meeting. Anyway, there we are. I've said it. Yep. So, we're moving on to item 3 already. Mary, could you read out the list of new members who are here today, please?
Oh, yes, sorry.
I'm going too fast for you.
Yeah, absolutely, sorry. Sorry about that. Right, I had things in the wrong order. Right, so, Mr President, the new ex officio members of Council, please stand when your name is read out and sort of vaguely wave, even if you've already done it. Doug Hurd, who's leader of the Historical and Archive Workgroup. Louise Nightingale, leader of the Communications and Marketing Workgroup. Ian Oram, David Mattingly and Alan Nunley, who are all stewards of the Fred E. Dukes International Bell Fund. And Andy Smith, who's our treasurer. New representative members have been elected. For the Ancient Society of College Youths, Colin Newman. who's here somewhere.
There we are.
Yeah.
No, he's got his table drawn.
Right. For the Bath and Wells, Charles Pipe Wolverston,
Marvellous.
at the back. For the Chester Diocesan Guild, Tom Nestor. For the Guild of Devonshire Ringers, Lynette Costello. Right. For Durham University Society, Phil Hughes. For the Hertford County, Stuart Brandt. For the Irish Association, Robert MacDonald. For the Ladies Guild, Alison Williams, previously a member. For Leeds University Society, Naomi Calvert. Naomi sent her apologies, actually. For the Llandaff and Monmouth, Matthew Turner and John Vesey. For the Middlesex County Association and London Diocesan Guild, Robert Lewis. And Adrian Newdle, both previously members. For the Norwich Diocesan Association, Raymond Harwood. For the St David's Diocesan Guild, Chris Hughes. For the Winchester and Portsmouth Diocesan Guild, Mike Hopkins-Till, previously a member, Adrian Nash, and Sian Nash.
Excellent.
And one member now represents a different society. Chris Birkby, previously of Sutherland Notts, now represents the Suffolk Guild.
Thank you very much, Mary, and my personal welcome to all those new to council or returning to council. I do hope you find it a rewarding experience, your opportunity to influence change, influence strategy, to get involved. Many of you will have been to some of the workgroup presentations this morning, so you can see some of the excellent work that is happening, but we very much rely on the affiliated societies and you as representatives to take this work forward. So if you've got skills, qualifications, interests in any of those areas, do please make yourselves known in that regard. I also wanted to remind anybody who hasn't received a data consent form, please get in touch with Mary so that you can obtain one from Mary. Now, special welcome also for some people with significant years of service. Is Derek Simpson here? I haven't seen him yet. Derek Simpson, who we hope is joining us, 56 years of continuous service on council. Alan Frost, 53 years continuous service. John Barnes, 50 years. And Chris Mew started 50 years ago. And Alan Glover, 45 years ago. Thanks very much. Item 4, apologies for absence. Mary.
Right. Apologies have been received from John Baldwin and Bill Butler, Fellows, from David Mattingly and Ian Oram, Stewards of the Freddie Dukes International Bell Fund, and from Bill Purvis, who's a steward of the Carter Ringing Machine Collection, Lee Simpson, Ancient Society of College Youths, Mike Hansford and George Wyatt, Bath and Wells, James Blackburn, Beverley and District, David Jones, Chester Diocesan Guild, Jenny Halliday and Jill Hughes, Derby Diocesan Association, Edward Sterland, East Derby's and West Nottinghamshire Association, Kate Wills, East Grinstead Guild, Philip Bailey, Sally Mew and Paul Seaman, Ely Diocesan, Matthew Kemble and Chris Povey, Four Shires Guild, Angela Newing, Gloucester and Bristol, Ernie de Lee Runciman and Beth Ingham, Lancashire Association, Naomi Calvert, Leeds University Society, Leanne Brooks, Leicester Diocesan Guild, Beverley Furness, North Wales Association, Anne Bray, Guild of St Agatha, Ben Duke, Society of Royal Cumberland Youths, George Dawson and Anne Sladen, Sutherland Notts, Neil Dodge, Suffolk Guild, David Katz, Swansea and Brecon, and Ian Self, Truro Diocesan Guild.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any other apologies that have not yet been pre-reported to Mary? Thank you. Any other apologies to be recorded? Thank you. Just a note that it is quite a high number of apologies this year. I hope it's not because of the venue or the change of timing of the council meeting, but we'll take that under review. But it's terribly important for affiliated societies to make sure that there is representation at the meeting. The rules are much more flexible, aren't they, Mary? So that if somebody is unable to attend, a guild can...
yeah, they can just resign and somebody be appointed immediately to replace them.
So it's very easy for an affiliated society to have representation here. Thank you. Item 5, in memoriam. We have a number of former council members who've passed away in the intervening period since the last meeting, and I'll ask you all to stand as we remember them.
John Michael Jelly. He represented the Leicester Diocesan Guild from 1963 to 1996 and attended 31 meetings. He died on the 20th of July 2018. Owen Christopher Robert Webster represented the Essex Association from 1978 to 1990 and attended 12 meetings. He died on the 27th of July 2018. Colin Michael Richard Orme, known to most of us as Mike, represented the Chester Diocesan Guild from 2002 to 2018. He attended 14 meetings and died on the 16th of August 2018. John Douglas Gallimore, honorary member 1993 to 96, and then the Veronese Association 1996 to 2002, attended 8 meetings and died on the 10th of August 2018. Peter Thomas Hercombe represented the Sussex County Association from 1976 to 1995. He attended 15 meetings and died on the 4th of October 2018. Christopher Michael Paley Johnson represented the Cambridge University Guild from 1960 to 75 and attended 12 meetings. He died on the 5th of January 2019. Peter John Eaves represented the Essex Association from 1960 to 1966. He attended 6 meetings and died on the 4th of February 2019. Jacqueline Susan King, née Evans, also known as Mrs. D.J. King, represented the Llandaff and Monmouth Diocesan Association from 1957 to 1981. She attended 21 meetings and died on the 15th of February 2019. Basil Jones represented the Chester Diocesan Guild from 1969 to 1976 and attended 3 meetings. He died on the 7th of May 2019. Keith George Game represented the East Grinstead and District Guild from 1969 to 1975 and attended 6 meetings. He died on the 6th of June 2019. Roland Harry Cook represented the Leicester Diocesan Guild from 1972 to 1975. He attended 2 meetings and died on the 16th of July 2019.
Heavenly Father, we offer you our heartfelt thanks for the friendship and fellowship that we have enjoyed with those departed members and former members of this council just named. We commend them to your everlasting care and protection as they have passed into your nearer presence. We ask this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son and Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. We now move to item 5 on the agenda, so your bundle of papers will, item 6 will come in handy here. So If I can direct you to page 5 in the papers bundle. The minutes of the previous meeting held in Lancaster, 27th of May 2018, are there. Are there any corrections to be reported to those minutes? All right, well, now I seek the agreement of the meeting. Do I have a proposer that we adopt these minutes? Thank you. Philip Green. And a seconder, please. Doug Davis. Thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Carried. Thank you very much. So just, again, a logistical point. As we move through the agenda, for anybody who is wanting to speak to an item, please signal your intention. Please wait for a microphone. We have stewards here who will bring a microphone to you. If you could stand as you speak, give your first name, surname and your affiliated society, please. And I think the streaming is on, Dave? Yeah, fabulous. Okay. I also need to remind members of our conflict of interest policy. If you have a conflict of interest, whether it's financial or business interest in Bell-related trades, before you speak, please declare any of those relevant interests as we proceed. Thank you. Item 7, we have the agenda already here. Are there any other matters arising from the minutes of last year that are not otherwise covered? If you'd like to indicate. Thank you. Item 8 already. Doing all right?
Yep. Keep going. Keep going.
If I could direct you, please, to page 11 in the meeting bundle. The report that you see here used to be called the Annual Report of Council, following our change of rules last year. This is now the Annual Report to the Charity Commission. According to Charity Commission rules, we've already agreed as trustees back on the 18th of May. I've already introduced the trustees here on the front row. So rather than a report to ringing at large, which of course it is, it's mainly filling the statutory requirements of the Charity Commission. But there it is on page 11. Are there any questions related to that report? Okay. And Mary, you'd like to update us on section 7 on page 12 of that report?
Yes. Yeah. Right. Just to add to what Christopher said, we've reshaped the report a bit and to be closer to current Charity Commission recommendations. And I can assure you that no information previously in the annual report of the Council has been excluded. Indeed, a bit more has been added. So on paragraph 7, which relates to the membership, you'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to go through all the changes, as there are rather a lot. But as far as I know at the moment, there are 6 fellows and 11 ex officio members, as Nigel Orchard ceased to be an ex officio member of this council upon his retirement as chairman of the Ringing World Board at the conclusion of their annual meeting. 66 societies remain affiliated, but the Devon Association may lapse at the end of this year. We're hoping that that won't happen, obviously. There are some changes in society membership entitlements due to changes in their membership numbers. The Durham and Newcastle is now entitled to 4 representative members instead of 3. The Irish Association to 3 instead of 2. And the Society of Royal Cumberland Youths to 4 instead of 3. The Dorset County is now only entitled to 1 instead of 2, and the Truro Diocesan Guild to 4 instead of 5. 2 of these changes in the Society of Royal Cumberland Youths and the Dorset County are due to changes in the way the figures are calculated under the new standing order. And the detailed figures are on the spreadsheet circulated with the papers for this meeting, and indeed detailed in, I think, this week's Ringing World in an article by John Harrison. There are 177 representative members. I'll briefly mention some of those who've retired who have been long-serving members. John Croxton and Jane Mason of the Hereford Guild, Peter Adcock, Norwich, Paul Johnson, Swansea and Brecon, Norman Mattingly, Truro and previously Hereford, and Peter Niblett, Winchester and Portsmouth, and previously Oxford University Society. These changes were all notified after the trustees' report was completed in May. But I apologise to Peter Trotman, who was, as many of you know, an honorary and additional member from 1996 until 2018, and his name should have been listed in that paragraph. There are regrettably a large number of vacancies. There are in fact 23 vacancies. These are in the Coventry Guild, the Guild of Devonshire Ringers, Durham and Newcastle, Gloucester and Bristol, Hereford, Lancashire, Lincoln, Llandaff and Monmouth, North Staffs, Norwich, Salisbury, Shropshire, Society of Royal Cumberland Youths, Sutherland, Nottingham, Suffolk, Swansea and Brecon, Truro and the Worcestershire and districts. Please, please encourage all your associations to elect members to fill these vacancies. This executive, those of us here, those of us there, we wish to be held to account, and we desperately want members who will participate and contribute to the Council's strategic direction and work.
Thank you, Mary, and I'll reiterate that the Council is its affiliated societies. So we definitely encourage that participation and to ensure that each affiliated society has its full entitlement of representatives here. Thank you. So now with that, as I say, the trustees have already approved this report, so it falls to me to propose that this meeting receives the report. So I propose that. And may I have a seconder, please? Oh, Fred Bone. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thanks very much. All right. Item 9, I turn to Andy Smith, our Treasurer, to talk us through the accounts for 2018 on page 14 and 15, with notes on page 13 of your paper bundle.
Thank you, Christopher. The accounts, as Christopher said, the statement of financial activities is presented on page 14. They have, rather like the trustees' report, already been approved by the executive at their May meeting of this year, and in accordance with the new governance arrangements, they are shown here for members to receive them. The accounts have been independently examined with no issues arising, and my thanks to Jeremy Cheeseman and Caroline Stockman for their hard work in this regard. My thanks also to particularly Beryl Norris and Ian Self for their work on the publications and library elements of the accounts, so thank you very much. And thanks to everybody else for their input, making my life relatively easy most of the time. Just a few detailed points in respect of the statement of financial activities and the balance sheet, starting on page 14. I've been asked to point out towards the bottom left-hand corner, there's a title, Library Outreach Day Deficit. That would be better described as order and disorder project expenses. So apologies for that, a slight glitch in my spreadsheet. Moving to the top left-hand corner, you will notice the affiliation fees is now at $7,960 for 2018, reflecting the change agreed a couple of years ago to £40 per member. The council meeting expenses in the general fund, again partway down the left-hand side, shows income at $30,557 and meeting expenditure on the other side of $30,846. Looks rather high figures on the face of it, but we need to remember that the Lancaster meeting to which it refers to was centrally organised, and all transactions, including everybody's teas and coffees and accommodation and everything else, went through the Central Council books rather than the local association. Also pleasing to report that the event, last year's AGM, almost broke even, which is a very good result. We usually reckon to have a deficit of 2,000 or 3,000. So that was a good result. The Ringing Remembers grant and the executive will groan here, because this is where I always say at every executive meeting, we had a 20,000 grant for Ringing Remembers, which is absolutely splendid. We've only actually spent about, in 2018, 4,300, so we still have approximately 15,000 or so surplus. So there's still money there for related projects, and that contributes greatly to the net incoming resources on the general fund of 20,000 for 2018. So some may have been wondering why the general fund is doing so well. That's the principal reason. Moving to the Bell Restoration Fund, which is a couple of columns in, one of our restricted funds. We were fortunate to receive a significant legacy in 2018, and also the balance of the old rescue fund, which has increased money available, of which approximately 44,000 is already committed to projects pending their successful completion. Moving to the balance sheet on page 15, and you'll notice my spreadsheet skills at the bottom of the page. I've actually done a pie chart this year. Very impressive. Very, not bad. Showing you the relative size of funds, but to focus on the figures in the bottom right-hand corner of the table, partway down, you'll notice our overall resources have increased from 409,000 to around about 444,000, and that's largely due to the increase in balances on the general fund and the Bell Restoration Fund that I have previously highlighted. Also, in terms of the balance sheet, you'll notice again, a bit further up, the library collection is valued at 87,616. That previous policy has been to ask for a revaluation from an expert in the field every 5 years. We've taken further advice on that, and in future we will be revaluing it once every 20 years in accordance with our expert advice, and that has been agreed by the executive. So there will not be a revaluation in 2019, which was when it was due under the old 5-year rule. Happy to take questions for the floor. I'll stop at that stage.
Thank you very much, Andy, and if I could thank you very much for all the work that you've done on those accounts and very clearly described to us. And if I could allude to the Chancellor, who was doing a spending review last week, rest assured that the trustees are very keen to support projects in support of our objects and spend some of this money.
Could I just add before the questions, one thing that Mary's reminded me of by email at some ridiculous hour in the morning. That's when it came through. We previously received a legacy from, if I get this right, Robert Kilby, and one of the things that he asked for within that his wishes was that appeal of Stedman Caters was rung each year. And I'm happy to report that in 2018, appeal was rung on the 27th of October for the Leicester Diocesan Guild as Mary de Castro Leicester of Stedman Caters, containing 2 firsts in the method and a first as conductor. So accounts, I can report something about ringing. Back to questions.
Thank you, Andy. So are there any questions for Andy Smith, please? Marvellous. Oh, there we are, Chris.
Am I right in saying that for ordinary members, this is the first time we have seen these accounts? They weren't printed in the Ring Award, were they? If they were, correct me. No, well, in that case, my point that I'm going to make is that we are here to sort of scrutinise. There's no way I can scrutinise accounts in about the 2 hours that I've had to see them. And so it doesn't just cover these accounts, it's going to cover some of the business later on. We just have not had time. And I don't know what the answer is, but I implore you to rethink and make sure that we do have more time in subsequent meetings. So I would personally be abstaining when we pass these accounts.
Thank you,
for
Chris.
that reason.
Noted. Thank you. Andy, you want to respond?
I think I'm correct in saying that although you may have only received your printed bundles in the last day or so, they have been online for some time. They have been on the Central Council website for some time and signposted.
Yeah. There was an email sent out on the all members list telling you when the document was uploaded. If you don't get Central Council emails, can you come and see me in the tea break or afterwards with your current email address, and we'll make sure that you are added correctly to that list.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Chris. Any other questions for Andy? Oh, Andrew Taylor. Andrew Wilby.
Andrew Taylor was the old treasurer.
Sorry about that.
Andrew Wilby, College Youth. I was intrigued by the advice you've received over the value of the library. And in 20 years' time, that will be at least 100% wrong, that figure. So it will represent quite a distortion as years go by, if it's left where it is. I would have thought at least we should be increasing it by the rate of inflation. But I'm not sure you should just accept any old advice that comes along. In terms of these accounts, it sounds very suspicious.
Well, we keep the policy under review, but this was suggested to, unfortunately, Ian South from the Truro Guild, who looks after the library in that respect. It's not here today. But we did take expert advice. Roger Green?
Yeah, it was Roger Green of Church Green Books who conducted the last valuation, and knowing that another association has made a similar change recently.
Suggest you just think about it. That figure, at the rate of inflation we have, which is what, 2–3%, that will be grossly out of date in 5 years, 10 years time.
Well, we can keep.
I think we should review that policy.
We can keep the policy under review, but that, as I say, is the. I'm no expert in libraries, but that is the expert advice we have received.
Thanks, Andrew and Andrew. Any other questions? Oh, Philip.
Philip Green, the Lincoln Diocesan Guild. I don't have to declare an interest in that. I do some printing for the Central Council and publications. Just a question on the Ringing Remembers grant and the amount spent. The surplus of that money, is that ring-fenced to Ringing Remembers? Or do we run a risk of having to repay it to whoever made the grant for the fact we haven't spent it all?
Thanks, Philip. So, two questions. So, in reverse order, there is no requirement to send back anything unspent. And to answer your first question, it's technically speaking unencumbered funds, but it would be our great hope that it is spent on projects that support, projects related to Ringing Remembers. Anthony Lovell-Wood.
Anthony Lovell-Wood, Salisbury. As many of you know from the Bringing World articles, Robert Welland wrote a very exact book on the situation relating to Salisbury deaths during the Great War. I have no idea at this stage whether he's broken even or not, but is it the kind of thing you could help on if he doesn't?
We would certainly consider it. Thank you. Any other questions for Andy? As I say, the trustees have already approved the accounts, so it falls.
So I would formally propose that the accounts are received by the members here.
And could I have a seconder for that, please?
Church.
Don McLean. Oh, Michael Church. Oh, they're fighting over it.
Who would you like to appear in the minutes?
Michael Church. Sorry, Don.
Sorry.
We'll save you up for the next one. All those in favour? Those against? And an abstention? Yeah. Fine. Thank you. So, lots of annual reports. The next one, the annual report of the Executive and Work Groups for 2018, which is the substantive chunk of the papers bundle running from page 18 through to page 34. I think, well, I've already introduced my fellow trustees. Just to formally introduce, did you stand last time? the work group leads. Did you do that?
Yes.
Well, you did. All right, so Alison Hodge, there you are. Doug Hurd, Louise Nightingale, Tim Hine, and Graham John. Where's he gone?
Just up
There he is. Terrific. Okay. So I know it's a big report, and again, Chris, if this is the first time you've seen it, my apologies. Anyway, Mary, you had a couple of comments to make?
Yes, just very briefly, that Doug and I wanted to apologise for the omission of a few names on page 22 when it mentions those who worked on the Peel's analysis. And 3 names have been omitted, unfortunately, and they are Ben Duke, Paul Camiade and Derek Simpson.
Thank you, Mary. Richard, I'll come to you. Oh, you want to respond to that? Richard Alton, please. Is there?
Chris Turner as well.
Is his name not? I thought his name was there.
I can't see it.
Oh, right, okay.
I've only just seen it.
Oh, right.
Oh, we're doing well here. We're doing well here. Okay. I mean,
Bottom of page 22.
Yeah.
thank you. Well, I was going to call formally for any corrections or omissions, but I mean, in the Ringing World editorial yesterday was the hope that this meeting would see some of the fruits of the labours that have been going on for the last 15 months. And what you see there in front of you in that substantial report, I hope, demonstrates some of the amazing activity that workgroup leads, workgroup members, all those associated with council activities in any way, shape or form. There's a heck of a lot going on, and if anybody's been to the workgroup presentations this morning, you will be a witness to that. But there we are. So we've had already an omission and a correction.
Apologise.
Any other omissions, corrections, or comments and questions, please?
Start with your bit and then say anything, and then go through each bit and ask for anything on. No, we've got one.
Sorry?
Stuart Piper, wasn't sure of District Association. On page 23, in the leading towers for Peels, under 13, we have Pershaw, that is Parish Centre. It is now officially these days known as the St Andrews Centre.
Thank you. The running order, because it's such a big report, we're just going to break it up into little chunks. So on page 16, which starts in the top left column with the red executive report, so that talks about what the executive themselves have been up to. Are there any questions on that section? I'm just going to take them each section at a time. Any questions on that section? Marvellous, thank you. Oh, what? Adrian.
Adrian Newbill, Middlesex CA in London DG. I noticed in this section that you've appointed an ex-officer as an independent examiner, and I wondered if you thought that's appropriate on the second column.
Yeah. Well, do you want to speak?
Which sort of puzzled me somewhat. I mean, I'm sure she's done an extremely good job, but it seems unusual to appoint an ex-officer as an independent examiner.
Yeah, we did have that discussion at the time of the appointment, but there was Caroline didn't have any involvement with the previous accounts or the financial side, so we did consider the very point you made, but we felt it was reasonable and she was independent.
She wasn't a trustee before.
No, and she wasn't a trustee before.
Okay. Thank you, Adrian. Any other questions on that section? So I'll then take each of the work group elements there. Communications and marketing with the purple highlight. It runs from page 16, 17. Where does that stop? all the way to page 21. Is that right? That's okay. Good. Any questions, comments on the communications and marketing work group? John Harrison.
John Harrison, Oxford Diocesan Guild. One of the achievements of this work group has been to update the website. I acknowledge that it looks attractive on the front page, but I do not consider that a website which abandons vast quantities of resource that this council has been built up over the years and makes them practically unavailable is a sensible move. I read all the words about doing things gradually, making sure it fits together, checking it's up to date. But, for example, I don't imagine anybody is going to go through the 956 biographies and put a Central Council logo on them. As far as I'm aware, they're not going to go out of date because the people that are about are all dead. I think it was a wrong decision, a foolish decision, to go to a new website without having properly built it with all the existing resources. I've heard all the arguments. It's about, oh, we've got to make sure it does this and make sure it does that. Fine, but it should not have gone live until the job was finished.
Thank you, John. Louise, do you want to respond to that?
Okay, thank you, John. When is a website ever finished? So I don't think we would ever have got to a finished position. Maybe not within the next few years. So we had to go live with something. We have left the existing content there so that if people want to access it, it is still available for use. And we have also said if there are things that you would like to access that you can't find, email us and we will provide the access to that information. In terms of the biographies example you gave, it's not necessarily about the content, but it's how we make it a really useful resource for people. So one of the things I'm working with Doug to look at is what functionality can we build into the website, which might require some investment because WordPress is good, but it's not a great platform for archiving and searching. So what we want to do is really invest in it. So we've got a super asset that people can access that information and they can research it and they can get what they need from it.
Louise, in terms of the ongoing project, is it a question of human resource?
Yes, so we've said quite a few times that if anybody can help out, then we are always on the lookout for people who want to join the group. One of the things I'm working through at the moment, which I do need to publish, is the timetable for the next phases of the website. I'm working with my fellow workgroup leads to understand what our priorities are. So Tim has recently sent over the volunteer and leadership groups' first chunk of information they want to go on there. So we've got to work together and make sure that that content's updated and is fit for purpose on the site. So that's going to be one phase. I'm working with Doug about archiving and what functionality we can put in place for that. So we will publish a schedule of phases and what is going to sit in each of those phases.
So Louise, it's fair to say if there's anybody here in the room who has skills and interests in website work, please get in touch. Please get in touch. I see Jane Wilkinson.
Wilkinson, starting all Common News, speaking, I hope, clearly and slowly. John Harrison comes from a sophisticated background and knows what he's doing. I am an elderly rabbit with no pretensions, and please, can we have something simple on the website, even if it's an overview simplicity, so that I can find my way around without having, as I increasingly do, to bring up the person that I think is responsible for it for the answer. Please, a little bit of simplicity for those of us who are not very bright.
Thank you, Jane. Tina.
Tina Stepp from the Scottish Association. I would just like to minute our appreciation as a society of the effort put in by the Ringing Remembers campaign. Besides the obvious figures that came out of the success of that campaign, we found there was a lot of collateral publicity that arose out of it that wasn't directly generated by the campaign, but which created sort of, shockwaves through local media. And also, about 50% of the recruits that we got in Scotland were from people who kind of vaguely heard about it, didn't necessarily go through the website, but definitely had an increased awareness of bell ringing. We've introduced more people to the bell tower in Glasgow than we ever have in about 10 years. And kept we've got more people than we can barely teach. And I would just like to say congratulations to Vicky and the team who led that initiative, because it was just worth it.
Thank you very much, Tina. Thank you. So we're still within the realms of communications and marketing. Oh, sorry. Oh, Stefan, sorry.
Stephen Shenter, Chester Artists Guild. Apologize for not standing because I'm trapped in. Looking at the activities for the Communications and Marketing Workgroup and listening to the comments yesterday and this morning about youth and encouraging youth into the ringing community, and looking also at the objectives for the executive, there's not very much there which overtly focuses on promoting and marketing ringing to young people. And I would have thought that would be something much more clearly stated in this report. There's reference to the Blue Peter stuff and the youth ringing thing, but nothing really which taking it out into the wider community and saying ringing is fun or whatever it is, that we hope would draw more people into ringing at a younger age group than those with the bus passes. So I just wonder whether that's something we could concentrate on over the next 12 months or more.
In fact, I might actually ask Tim, do you want to respond to that?
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm not very good with these mics. You might have to have this twice because it may come up later, but we did, I know it doesn't quite exactly answer it, but in the youth conference which took place on the first Sunday of March this year at Worcester, we had about 30 people under 30 at the conference. I'm not saying there's 30 seems pretty young to me, but there you go. And we got a fairly good response to the conference generally, and quite a good readout. I probably better not say very much more, but I think it's fair to say that youth is seen by us generally as very important, so I would agree, and we would very much like to do more.
And we will hear a bit more about that in the forward plan item as well, but fair comments, Stefan, thank you. Okay. We're moving a little bit out of the territory of communication. Oh, Jackie, sorry.
Jackie Brown, University of London. Just want to make the point that there's the universityringing.org website, which is focused, I know, predominantly at university students, but there's a youth element there as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. All right. Could I move on to the next work group on page 21, History and Archive. Runs quite a few pages as well, 21 through to, oof, blimey, 28. Any questions, queries, comments on that work group's activities? Doug? Oh, Paul. Paul Camiard. Lucy.
Paul Camiard, Essex Association, and one of the missing names on the full report. Clearly on page 25, the analysis of appeals by method and change on near the tower bell column. In squeezing the columns to get everything to fit, there are a few totals that don't look right. The total royal, plus or minus, should be 11 and not 1. The total cater should be 15 and not 1.
Fair point. Thank you, Paul. Well spotted. Thank you. Anything more for History and Archive? Very much so. On page 28, Stewardship and Management, which runs 28 through to 30. Very concise. Any queries, questions, comments for Stewardship and Management Workgroup? Well, Alison. There we are. All right, moving on. The Technical and Taxonomy Workgroup starts on the third column of page 30 and runs through to page 33. Technical and Taxonomy. Any queries, questions, comments on the work of the Technical and Taxonomy Workgroup? Oh, Robin.
Mr. President, Robin Woolley, Show of News. Having looked at 2 or 3 others of these workgroup reports, I see they've given the members of the previous committees which cease to exist. Unfortunately, the Taxonomy Committee doesn't seem to have done it. Perhaps this could be added somehow. Thank you.
Thank you. Graham? Yeah, happy?
I think most of the work groups that had the existing committees working for a longer period after the start of the new work group. So a lot of the transition that we had in the technical taxonomy was fairly abrupt. So I think that was the reason for the non-inclusion of the former work groups, former committees rather than anything else. So the work that is described in that report was undertaken by those members, and any members from the previous committees were absorbed into the new work groups and are listed there.
Thank you, Graham. Any other queries, questions, comments for Technical and Taxonomy? Thank you. Okay, on page 33 and 34, we have the report of Volunteer and Leadership Workgroup. Any questions, queries, comments on that workgroup's activities? Well, there we are. Now, I invite, well, I'm going to propose it, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yes. So I now propose that we receive and adopt that report. May I have a seconder, please? Philip Barnes. Oh, Don. Next time, I promise. All those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Margaret Horrott. Thank you very much. We're rattling on, Mary.
Good.
Conscious that the report that you see there covers predominantly the work of 2018, and here we are now in September of 2019, we have an item here which is just for each of the work groups to give a bit of an update on their work January through to August 2019. So I'll speak initially just on behalf of the executive. So the kind of things that we as an executive get up to, we have a monthly meeting. Most of the time that's by Skype because we've got some in Australia. And then on a quarterly basis, we meet face-to-face, including the work group leads. And the relationship there between the executive trustees and the work group leads is a governance and scrutiny role and very much a sponsorship and support role. So, we might have a Minister of Police and we also have a Chief of Police. So keeping it, so there we are. So otherwise no correlation with Yes Minister. But the kinds of things that the executive's been up to, we scrutinised and approved the framework for method ringing this year. We clarified the standing orders and stewards for the Fred Dukes Fund and got that straightened out. We considered and adopted a privacy notice that is now on the website. You've already heard that we scrutinised and approved the 2018 accounts and the trustees report. We took some advice on the library revaluation schedule, rather a lot of planning for this weekend's activities as well, and then fielding innumerable inquiries from around the exercise on the work of the council. So that's basically what the executive got up to. I'm going to invite each of the workgroup leads to just very briefly give us an update on their activities of 2019, and we looked at what order am I going to do it in. So I went alphabetical by surname of workgroup lead. So Mr. Hine for volunteer and leadership, H-I-N before H-I-R.
We can't see.
Sound test. Okay, thank you, Mr. President. We have here my slide. Is that all visible?
Youth. Stefan. Youth.
So this is about the volunteering and leadership development group, and members have been through what we've done already. So you have the written report. So this is covering things that are more current. And I apologise to people who honoured us with your presence this morning. There'll be some repeat of what we've done. If you were stuck with me in a lift and you asked me, before we get to the next floor, what are the current things, I would say youth, leadership and recruitment. And within the recruitment bit, particularly holding on to your recruits, so retention. And I would say we have 20 members, and at its core, some very passionate, active members, and some who don't have so much time, and there are others who've chosen to be associate, and I would say your time will come. Another point to make before we get down the list a bit is we have partnerships in mind with other organisations, particularly the Ringing World and ART. So, for example, the ART constitution says that they have a link with us. It explicitly states that. So on each of the topics we have there's a kind of a done dimension to it. There shouldn't be anything up there where we haven't done anything. But there's also an ambition to take things forward. So if I go down to the youth bit, which I was helpfully cued in on earlier. So we had our conference in March. There was quite good feedback on the conference. There were 90 people there. We did offer, the executive were very helpful, offering funding to get more young people there. In the end, that wasn't used. The keynote was David Hull. Some other prominent people gave speeches to everybody, and they were also very well received. Then we had interactive sessions around 4 topics, one of which was university ringing, one was the NYC, another one which I'll just call what Simon Edwards does. We called it mixed age activities. On my way home, actually, we found Simon's birth certificate in the car. He left it, so I can confirm he is quite young. So these were the youth leader experts. We also had Roger Haynes, who has, as some of you know, won awards for his school group that he runs. And so we got these people talking with a group walking around, and we got a lot of feedback from that, which came into what I call a 10-point plan, things we might do. And
But it isn't really a plan because we need people to do it. A plan is when you're going to do it before there is ambitions. So my question is, who would like to help? Come and see me if you would like to help with the youth side of things. Also tomorrow, I think this was mentioned, Chris Ridley will be chairing a session on university ringing, and we also have youth bands from David Pearson. So I'm going to nip on now to leadership, and you'll see in the report that we had 3 interviews with prominent leaders last year. We've done 2 more with another one planned. Again, if you'd like to join us and interview somebody, that would be great. You don't have to be on the group. Elva did the work last year, she's not on the group. We'd like to do more on training for leadership as well later, that's an ambition. So now we're on to recruitment and retention. Clearly, we think that retention is the tougher nut. Matt Lawrence has created a workshop which we intend to test in 1 or 2 places, north and south. And the plan is that in March 2020, as part of the art conference on the Sunday, we will be running a conference hosted by V&L on recruitment. So quickly, other things, education column, it's been very successful, carrying on there. Ringing centres, slight refocusing that we've agreed with Maureen, so we're no longer recognising ringing centres. We're looking to people to assess themselves against the question, are we trying to make a difference? Web materials, kind of covered earlier, but we clearly would like those to be better. Mr. President, I would just say, how do we put this? We need help because we're ambitious and not complacent.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the update. Are you happy to receive questions? Fergus?
Fergus Tracy, Devon Guild. I'm sort of conscious that there's a lot of young people who are one youngster in a tower of older people. What are we doing to reach out to those people, particularly if they don't take the ringing world?
I agree that the ringing world, we need to be diplomatic about this, but it isn't taken by everybody. So some of the presentations tomorrow are about different ways of reaching people. So I totally agree that there are these kids of 18, 16 in a tower and everybody's under 60. And how do we reach out to them? And I think that social media and everything is the thing. I think the Lilliputters movement is an example, and I think the Winning World competition does great work because it does reach into towers and grab talented people the right side of 19. And I think that, personally, I can't give you a better answer than that.
Oh, Tina Stockman.
Sorry, Tina Steckland again, Scottish Association. Can I just add that when I was back in, a very long time ago, when I was at university, most of my friends who were ringers who had subscriptions to the Ringing World were purchased them as gifts by grandparents. And I suggest that as there probably are quite a lot of grandparents in this room, that you do so, because it's probably not a purchase that you might make on a student grant, but you might appreciate it as a present.
Thank you, Tina.
And of course we have the Learning the Ropes 50% discount at the moment.
Thank you. All right, Tim, thank you very much. Historical and Archive update.
Thank you. Let's have a quick look and see which of the presentation I'm actually looking at here.
What I say may not have any bearing to that because I spent all day rewriting what I was going to say. Partly after this morning's presentation where I got some really good feedback. Anyway, let's start with a bit that I planned, and if I go off page then you'll probably notice it starts to ramble. A lot of what this work group does can be classified as business as usual. That's largely because history doesn't end, it just keeps on going, it's kind of relentless like that. The frequent items that we see in the ringing world are, they show this, and while not all of these are written by members of the work group, a great number of them will have been helped by members of the work group, the library and the biographies people in particular. So there are tentacles that go out from a relatively small group. Sticking in this year, the annual appeals analysis is in the meeting papers we just looked at by Richard and his team. Richard did send all the names, it's just we didn't print them. So not Richard's fault. This thing has been going on for about as long as the Central Council, and it provides a valuable accounts of the state of bill ringing as seen by experts in the field. Classified experts in the field are people who ring more bills than me, most people. Meanwhile, the library team has been working some years on making the library more accessible, and if anyone would like to try out the latest prototype search page, then send me an email and I'll send you a link. You can have a play. This morning on that sort of subject, we've got some really good feedback from the Ringing World team on digitisation and having data online. And they're doing different than what they're doing in the bellboard work. And the idea of backplating appeals on bellboard, that seems to be had by a whole load of people, and it comes up on Facebook about once a month. And it looks like one of those ideas which, time has come, it just needs a bit of organisation and making sure that we as ringers don't tread on the Ringing World's feet, and the Ringing World helps where they see appropriate as well. So I think there's a project there to be had during the year. It does give us an opportunity to do another thing, which is to capture billboards online as well. Now, there's been some interest in that as well for a number of reasons, and bellboard would be a nice place to make a start with that. Lots of associated issues around that of how you manage it and quality and stuff like that. And of course, if you don't make a start, you don't get anything done. One of the comments that was made on Facebook the other day was, well, that just sounds tedious. Well, that's the nature of a lot of this sort of work, is that there's a lot of it, and you just have to be patient and you just have to keep on working at things. And after a while, the tedious work for you is then a resource for the exercise at large, and then becomes useful, and then you start looking at things like bellboard, like Dove, like Felsted, where people have already done the tedious work, and now we can't imagine being without them. And I think these sort of projects are the sort of thing that we can coordinate, we can work on going forward. So I'd like to finish off by thanking everyone who's agreed to continue with the interesting work of History and Archive during the transition from the committees to work groups, especially the stewards, Alan, Bill and James, friends of the library, Richard's Peel team, and numerous others, and there have been quite a few others who I've sent emails to and said, can you help me with so-and-so? And they've come back and said, well, I'm helping somebody else with an article, or I'm doing this piece of research, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. A whole lot of people out there who are interested in the subject and want to do more. Thanks to everyone who's supported this. There's still change to be had, there's still things to work on, but we are moving in the right sort of direction, and I think we've got an idea of where we're going. Communicating it may be another matter, but I think we've got an idea of where we're going. I think I'll stop there. Oh no, I won't stop, because I just forgot something. There we go, we're now off piste. We're out to the scrappy little things. Photos. New people, new members, in the break which we're about to have, on the third floor, the little balcony thing. If you want your photo taken, so that you have a nice photo for when your obituary is in the third floor, we'll take a photo, and so that's all it's for, it's not for anything else. It's just so that we've got a nice photo of what you look like now, because you look at your best now. Yeah, but when you're dead, you don't, yeah? Third floor, in the break.
Thank you, Doug. There we are. So much humour in History and Archive. Who knew? Questions, comments, queries for Doug? Work of 2019?
Email me any time later if you're...
Great. Thank you very much, Doug. Thank you. Alison, stewardship and management, please. You're all running over time, by the way. Dear, oh dear.
Thank you very much. I shall say very little. Is this too loud? It sounds desperate. This is very crowded, but it gives you a feeling, I hope, of what our work group is covering. We have 3 major themes, and we have many subsidiary topics within those themes. In essence, we've carried on in the last few months of fielding up to 10 inquiries a month, typically. So there's a lot of work going on in the background. When I say 10 inquiries a month, that's new ones. Some of those may be resolved in one phone call or one email. It could actually mean that that is work group members helping a church or a team or an area with a project for months, if not years. So there's a lot of work going on in the background, and you know the sort of things that can go on in these topic areas. To say that we cover those areas, I think, is an understatement. We have quite a number of people in the work group, but what we need for the future, and I really want to concentrate on the future, is more people who can help us on the group, not necessarily as full members, but people with expertise or experience who can contribute possibly on an occasional basis, particularly if they've actually got professional experience or have professional contacts into the trade industry, particularly where we get inquiries that verge on the legal end of formalities, and we need people with professional indemnity and professional expertise that can be backed up even with commercial contract knowledge. That's in the extreme. But more volunteers and more advisors are welcome pretty much across the piece. Not full members of the work group necessarily, but full members are of course welcome. In particular, we like people from Scotland, Ireland and Wales. We, at the moment, don't even have people from Cornwall, Northern England, East Anglia or South East. We're really very, very concentrated centrally. And although we can do a lot by electronic means nowadays, there's nothing like having people hands-on to do actual advice in towers, physically present, real and live. A lot of what we want to do, and the work groups are trying to update the website as being stated, it's not just porting things across and adding logos. We've talked about younger members. Having been in the higher education sector, young people don't even carry a pen or a paper these days. If anything takes up more than one phone screen, they will not look at it, and it is irrelevant to them. So updating information on websites is YouTube clips, videos, bullet information, very quick, very succinct, and that's the sort of expertise and information we're trying to acquire and put on the website to help some of these people and attract younger people to come in to join us. And having said that, you don't need the expertise before you come and join us. Quite honestly, in my early days in trying to help this council, I look back in retrospect, and heaven forbid, I was pretty naive and green. I have learned a lot through being on the council, and I hope that we can welcome other young people who want to learn and gain an experience from being involved in the council. And heavens, if they're going for UCAS applications, talking about something different, But it's just not football and reading and watching films. Good grief, they'll get a place in the university like a shot. Anyway, I'm going back to my old days. I won't say any more now, I'll take questions. Please do come and join us, and in particular, come and hear about something that we have done for the first time this year, and that is the Westerly Awards tomorrow. It's all in your programme, come and see it tomorrow. I'm not going to take any more time. Thanks, Christopher.
Alison, thank you very much. You mentioned your call for, well, everybody's mentioned their call for volunteers to help in specific projects, specific activities. One in particular, if you don't mind me mentioning, that Chris Mew, who for many, many years has been our go-to guy for safeguarding, is really very keen to step down from that. So in particular, anybody who is either currently a safeguarding officer in their association or in their world of work, it's a crucial role for the whole Central Council. Chris, I'm not sure whether, do you want to say any words about what's involved or not?
People are already involved. I think over the years people are mostly familiar with what's involved in safeguarding on a local level. But the key thing is that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, some of which is very confidential and requires discretion and tact. So we want people to bear that in mind.
So particularly interested in filling that role, please. So if you are yourself interested or you know somebody that we can tap on the shoulder, please let us know. Thank you. So any questions, please, for stewardship at the moment? Paul Flavel.
Paul Flavel, Surrey Association. I've used my Hubble telescope to read the writing on the screen, but I don't see the word training. Are you operating training programs in these areas, or how does it work?
Yes. How does it work? Tim and I talk about this. We work, Tim Hine, leadership and a volunteer and leadership work group. We will be running, hopefully, more training courses in conjunction with guilds and associations. It came up in the discussions that we had in some of the presentations this morning. We don't want to arrive unannounced in a guild or association area, but if guilds and associations, please take this back to your local areas, particularly if you're territorial guilds and associations, and say, how can the work group help? And conversely, if you have experts in your area, or people knowledgeable, or people who want to learn, or people who want advice on how to actually do inspections, please let us know and we'll try and help out willingly. But again, we don't have complete regional coverage, and that's what we'd like to see, and we'd like to see some youngsters learning and coming on board. Common theme.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Alison. Stefan.
Stephen Gentek, Chester Diocesan Guild. Just following on from that question, there are 40 items up on the board. Which of those do you regard as kind of hot items that might be threats to the continuation of ringing in particular areas that we should be really concentrating on?
Perhaps I'll give my personal view. Perhaps I'll give a personal view rather than any particular work group analysis. I feel, in this environment could have one incident where somebody is injured or, heaven forbid, killed, and some judge somewhere could give us a pretty hard time. The question of noise, particularly with hearing loss for participants, and external noise to neighbours. I was on a ringing holiday in the summer, and quite honestly, I would say that neighbours were justifiably concerned about the noise that we were creating. And it's very sad when ringing is curtailed because of noise complaints. If they decided to contact the environmental health authorities, I think they would have been fully justified. And if an environmental health officer took us to task, again, we could face some serious questions. Safeguarding could lead us into hot water. So I think there are some critical areas where we have to be very, very careful. And I think as guild and association representatives, and work group members, we can think about that sort of thing very seriously. So I think it's a good point to make. I think we could land up in hot water, and some of the old style approaches of the church was there first, I'm afraid, won't wash with some authorities.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Alison. Anything more for stewardship and management, please? Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you. Graham John, technical and taxonomy.
You can see behind me the activities of the work group, and they're described in the report as well. So I'm not going to cover anything that's in the report. I'm just going to say a couple of items that have happened since that report was written. One of them is that if you've been on the Dove website recently, you may have noted that we're not accepting any updates to the Dove website at the moment. That is because we have been for some time wanting to replace the system for maintaining Dove because it had been for a very long time running on John Baldwin's DOS system. It is increasingly difficult to maintain the data in that way, and it has come to a halt. That's probably not temporary. So our action is to accelerate our efforts in replacing the replacement system, which have been going on, but we hope to get the new system up and running to be able to get those updates going again. The site itself is still available, it just means that the latest changes will be sometime before they actually get posted onto the site. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The other one is that, as you know, the executive approved the framework for method ringing in February, and its implementation date was the 1st of June, so it replaced the council decisions at that time. And since then, we've been implementing those changes as far as the method library is concerned. So the methods libraries are up to date with the main changes. There will be a few that will take a little bit longer, but essentially the methods library reflects those changes. And as an initiative that was described in the framework, we talked about retroactively recognising both performances and methods that, if they were run now under the framework, would have been acceptable, but weren't under the decisions, because there was a vast raft of methods, over 600 methods, that were not being run in court appeals, for instance, before the rules changed to allow that. So rather than just leave those methods out, we have retroactively been adding them to the libraries. And there is an article in this week's Ringing World on that subject. So with those two updates, I'm going to just answer any questions, if there are any.
Dave Kelly.
Dave Kelly, Fellow. Going back quite a few years ago, when the online database, or the database started, it was initially intended just to be an electronic copy of the published Dove. Now, John Baldwin extended that to include details of bells, and it's now the prototype which is called Bells Register. I'm not so sure that that's ever had official Central Council approval. What is the policy of the new group? Are you going to maintain that and expand it, or are you going to abandon it?
That national record of bells is part of the DUC project and will be part of the new database, so yes, it will be included. Does that answer that? Yeah.
John Harrison.
John Harrison, Oxford Diocese Guild. Follow up to that point. There are currently 2 places you can go to look for details of bells. One is PNBR if you get to it through Dove, i.e. the bell in question is at a tower with more than 3 bells, and the other is on George Dawson's website. I would be interested to know what the relationship between the two data sets is, and if it's different, which is considered definitive, or whether there's any effort to merge the two, so that there is a national or international database.
Okay. I don't know if is Tim Jackson somewhere in the room? Yeah. Tim, do you want to try and answer that question?
That also speaks to your curation.
Tim Jackson, ex-officio. Slightly biased, but I would say that Dove would be the definitive. More seriously, yes, longer term, we do have plans to try and absorb the George Dawson spreadsheets into the database going forward. We haven't yet got a policy to resolve places where the data is different between the two sets. The main objective there would be to bring in sets of bells that aren't part of rings. We'd obviously look at any discrepancies. I believe more effort probably has gone into maintaining the Dove data than the George Dawson sets as far as the rings are concerned.
Thanks, Tim. John Harrison again.
In fact, a quick follow-up. Everything on George Dawson's website is accessible. The Dove database is only accessible if the bell in question is in a tower with 3 or more bells. Otherwise, you have to send an email and ask the question, which is rather more onerous in terms of manpower. Are there any plans to make the underlying database accessible, which would include towers where there are not 3 or more ringing bells?
Yes.
There we are. Any other questions for technical and taxonomy? Chris New.
Just adding a little bit to the business about bell records. First of all, Graham, we actually came to a formal agreement on computer work to transfer the Dove database to a new system. That was written down some 2 years plus ago at the time that John Baldwin gave up. So that should be ongoing. The other thing is that, and Tim knows about this, we have been making inquiries about getting all the relevant people together, not only George Dawson, but people like Chris Pickford and obviously Dove stewards, but also you may be aware that the Church Care is trying to update its own database, obviously only interested in Church of England buildings, but I have been making inquiries to try and get everyone together on that very matter. But it needs coordination of all the sources of information.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes, thank you. I think that conversation needs to carry on really, because I know Tim's had some sessions, but that trust seems to be largely doing its own thing at the moment, and there seems to be a lack of economy of effort, and I think we would certainly want to help that exercise if we can.
Thank you very much. Moving on then, volunteer and leadership, Louise Nightingale. Anna.
C&M.
So, C&M, sorry, communication marketing. I'm slipping. I'm C&M. Duh.
So, volunteer and leadership.
Sorry.
Okay, so just a few key highlights then from me. Obviously, website we've spoken about, we've done the first phase of that. There will be future phases going forwards. As part of that process, we have taken the opportunity to review the materials that we've got, following on from a brand review that we did late last year, I think it was. We're looking at all of the different assets and materials that there are across the estate and making sure that they've got the right Central Council logo and that they've got the same look and feel. And if people pick up a leaflet, they can identify it as being central council. So that's ongoing, and that's working with the workgroup leads as well, because whilst we own the look and feel and the brand, the workgroup leads very much own the content. Another kind of key highlight from this year is we've done a review of how we support events. So we get a lot of requests from different associations and guilds if we can go along there and support an event. With 8 core members of the work group, it's going to be pretty difficult for us to attend every single event that takes place. So what we are going to put together is a concept of event in a box, which will be a set of best practice and guidelines and materials and things that people can use. We trialled out this approach at the London Landmarks Half Marathon. I think Dave Bestford's probably still having nightmares about how we tried to get the chamber ring inside the vestibule of St Mary le Bow. It was a bit of a painful process, but it was a really good thing to get people in and engaging with bells, and it was good input into the review that we were doing about events. So hopefully over the next few months we'll have the first draft of that event in a box concept, and we'll get that out there. And we'll be working with guilds and associations. So Vicky, to my right, who is our newly appointed PRO, has been trawling through all of the websites for guilds and associations, looking to see who those PROs are or different comms contacts. And I think out of 66 websites, there were 12 listed PROs or comms contacts. So it's something that we know we need to reach out there and see what we can do to improve those relationships. Going forwards, so anybody who was at the presentations this morning will have seen one of the big focuses for next year in terms of campaigns is VE75. Vicky is hooked in with Bruno to make sure that we've got a common plan in place. A question was asked as to whether Central Council is endorsing this. It's not. It's more to say that we want one common plan and that we're working together and making sure that we're not confusing people, as there was the potential to with Battled Over and Ringing Remembers. So we want to make sure that we've got a consistent message getting out there. I think look out for information on that in the new year, but there'll be lots coming up to support that. Website, we've got a few more phases, as I touched on earlier, so I won't go into any more detail on that. One of the other things that we're looking at, and you'll see a board outside, is insights and segmentation. And talking to Phil Barnes, the exec sponsor, at one of our recent work group calls, we are going to pull together a proposal for maybe using some external support to really shape up what are the different groups that we want to engage with, how do we engage with them, what language do we use. So we talked about youth earlier and how are we engaging with the youth. There are different ways depending on the marketing segment that you're looking at, so we're going to do a piece around that. But we're also mindful that we're going to need to understand from the current ringing community what it is that makes ringing great and what great things are already happening out there. So if you do get a chance as you walk past the board, please do give us your feedback. And I think they're the highlights. Any questions?
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the work groups and the work group leads for the work that they've been doing through 2019. Thank you very much. I'm suggesting that we rattle through item 12 to give you something to chat about while we have our break. So we'll do item 12 and then we'll have a comfort stop. So here we go. Here we go. Oh, I've got the clicker. Oh my goodness. Okay. Thank you. Does it qualify yourselves? Here we are. In the rules, we, as part of our agenda item, is to present forward plan and budget for the future year. So this is a verbal report rather than anything that you have tabled. By way of prologue, I'd like to think, and I hope you agree with me, that there's been some quite good work going on. It does take time for change to bed in. So the big vote in May of 2018 and the kind of changes that we're attempting to implement do take time to bed in. I certainly want to acknowledge, if I haven't made it explicit before, the good work of those who were on committees and who were committee chairs prior to May of 2018. But the new ways of working, while we're still, working them through, are beginning to show fruit. And I hope that the reports that you see in the meeting papers are testament to that. So looking forward to 2020, in developing our forward plan for the next year, a number of activities have taken place. Focus groups and consultations between executive trustees, with workgroup leads and workgroup members, taken soundings from a wide cross-section of partner organisations, and also a lot of listening. We're very keen to listen to comments, critiques from around the exercise regarding issues that are facing ringers and ringing. So now, keeping in mind the high-level strategic objectives that I bang on about rather a lot, we've proposed a few key themes. It is fairly ambitious. It'll put a degree of pressure on our budget forecasts, which Andy, I'm sure, is welcome. And we'll talk about those estimates in the next item 13. But we do continue to rely on the skills and the expertise and goodwill of volunteers. So we particularly value the input of representatives from affiliated societies, and we restate, as you've already heard, our invitation for new volunteers to step forward. Now let's see if I can get the technical word. So, you know about this. We say it often enough. It's embedded in our rule book. And I don't need to read that out. You know it already. And these strategic objectives that I've been going on about for the last couple of years, so those still hold true last year, this year, and next year. So how are we articulating those into specific plans for 2020? They can be encapsulated into 4 key themes. So building and developing partnerships, being more efficient and effective, engaging in data gathering and analysis, and delivering focused services based on those objectives. And I'll just run through those very quickly. But also, we're very interested in your feedback on these. This is your opportunity to guide that strategy and be involved in that development of that strategy. So in terms of building partnerships, some good work already happening with Ringing World Liaison and ART Liaison. We want to deepen and broaden that even further, and within ringing stakeholder groups, but also external stakeholder groups. I didn't say Church of England, because it's not just Church of England, is it? So all dioceses, Historic England, the National Trust, Church Conservation Trust, Friends and Friendless Churches, Heritage Alliance, blah, 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 blah. We've been doing a lot more outreach work, and I think even with the Ringing Members campaign, we saw much more public interest, government interest, all sorts of other charitable organisations quite interested in what this whole bell ringing thing was all about. So we want to build on that, and then that gives us an opportunity, a launch pad, to present bell ringing to fresh audiences, new audiences. Efficient and effective, and Graham alluded to this himself. Gosh, there's a lot of duplication, replication of effort across all sorts of services, and we want to help, if we can, to curate those, offer an opportunity to provide, common authoritative sources, and make sure we do the job once and do it right, do it well. And so streamlining our operations even more and making it very clear who does what, which will also include making it very clear on the website. Data gathering and analysis. There we are. So direct membership is still on the agenda, and we will be doing a feasibility study to start with. But particularly interested in the future of bells in closed and closing churches and what that's going to look like, not only next year, but in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Hopefully leveraging some of the big data sources like Bellboard to get some evidence to determine the current vigour or otherwise of the exercise, and using other data sources as well to understand key trends. And then specific things for next year. So we talked about, Paul was asking about training courses before. So we're very interested in communities of practice, so gathering together all the PR people from the affiliated societies, gathering together town maintenance people, gathering together safeguarding people. So next March, we already have booked in a recruitment and retention workshop, so please put it in your diary. We've talked about the VE Day 75 commemorations on the 8th of May. Historical and Archives Group are going to be doing a focus day in November. Obviously there'll be the meeting next year in Nottingham that we'll hear about later. Alison and her group doing a lot of work for training courses in stewardship and management. We're very keen, we talked about all this ringing remembers of cash that's washing around. We know that all of the 3 main courses this year, Essex, Hereford and Bradfield, were super duper oversubscribed with applications, and plenty of people saying, what can we do more? Can we do more? Can we do more? So we're looking very keenly to sponsor and support another course with a particular theme of looking at ringing members recruits and taking them to the next level. And we've got the budget there to do it. We don't want to keep our eye off the ball, recruitment and retention at those early core competence levels of ringing, but also excellence in striking, excellence in innovation, method ringing and so on. We don't want to lose sight of that as well. And you've already heard about some of the business as usual items. So in a nutshell, that's the focus for 2020. You'll see in item 13 on page 35 a bit of a forecast there, and also of course with any change of leadership in the trustees there will be a further revision of this work. But any feedback on that or any of the material that you've heard over the break we're very keen to hear about. But I'll take questions now too. Oh, John Harrison.
John Harrison, Oxford Divers Guild. It was on my list of things to what I was wondering about. About 10 years ago, we recognised the critical importance of understanding what was happening in the ringing community. We set up the Trends Working Group. It did some valuable initial work, then for reasons probably best veiled, it stopped. I think it's disappointing that the council has let several years elapse since it stopped, and I'd like to know there's some positive intention to try and pick up again where that committee was heading and make something happening other than just vague feelings like we'll use any information that's available.
I think allowing it to lapse for so many years is it's not through like a trying, John. You know that. Okay, we called for nominations for that committee year after year. It's a little bit toxic, I'm afraid. Yeah. However, I'm particularly keen in, perhaps not, survey methodology is there, attitude surveys and so on. I'm particularly interested more in sort of the census style approach, where we're using these resources that are there. Yeah, let's start with those. I particularly like, is Giles in the room? Yeah, where's Giles? No, right away. So Giles does an informal thing, is it each November, where he asks how many bells rang this Sunday?
January 8th.
Oh, there you are. So quite informal, but the more often you do it, the more credence it has, doesn't it? So something like that. Yeah, why not? But no, we're not losing our eye on the ball there, John. Absolutely not. Anyway.
Stella Jantek, Chester Divers and Guild. In your building relationships slide, you referenced a lot of organisations for whom the membership is probably quite elderly. We've got nothing in there about media, BBC, or organisations such as an education system, where we should be building relationships to try and get the message across about ringing to perhaps a slightly younger community. Just I wonder whether that might be another bully to consider.
Absolutely. Good point. Yes, thank you. That's good feedback, and we'll certainly, we have, like the Bells on Sunday piece carries on. That's a quite a good door into the BBC, and we've got a couple of other contacts within the BBC that we're working on as well. I wasn't going to mention something. Okay. Jim.
Jim Crabtree, Sutherland, Nottingham. Two things. One of them, I was interested earlier, Alison mentioned looking in Dove, how many ringable towers had practices, and that strikes me as quite a good measure of trends if that's looked at on a regular basis. Quarters and peals do tell you something, but practice nights is probably more useful. And the other thing is there any liaison with clergy training organisations?
Thanks, Jim. You'll be aware that there's a little leaflet that kicks around every so often called Bells in Your Care. And we've tried quite hard to get into some of the theological colleges, but they've come back to us saying, A, there's no room in their curriculum, it's just too full, and B, it doesn't really make sense to any people who are in theological colleges until they're actually in a parish. But I think there is a piece of work to be done there, and in fact Maureen was speaking this morning, about that theology of ringing, getting a common vocabulary between ringers and clergy to help in those clergy relations. I'd like to see a bit more activity with the clerical guild, definitely.
They're a key point for outreach, aren't they, for us?
Oh, okay,
Cape Naval Surrey Association. I've actually mentioned that a few years ago I did put together a list which I've made a note for myself to send through to Vicky, of diocesan communications officers. They all have them. They're relatively easily identifiable from the diocesan websites. And I did put together an email list of them all and sent out various communications to them a year or two ago. Mostly met with silence. But a few of them came back to me. Some of them said, sort of wildly enthusiastic, "Oh, it's great to hear from you. We'd love to hear more about Bellringers. Do get in touch," and this sort of thing. Other people coming back saying, "Oh, I'll put this in our next diocesan newsletter that goes out to all the parishes." But I think that contact fell away a little bit because you do need to have something fairly positive to say each time. You can't just go and say hello once a quarter or whatever. But it is a good resource, and of course one would hope the clergy see those as well.
Yes, thank you, Kate. And if I could just perhaps follow on from that, and we're looking at this partnerships piece. It's good to be a little bit creative with these things sometimes. So not so long ago I was asked if I'd do one of those Kathy Booth podcasts, which happened, and it went out on her podcast channel and my Twitter feed. But a lot of these organisations, whether it's Historic England, whether it's Church Care, Heritage Alliance, they will syndicate your Twitter feed if you ask them. And so it was no hardship at all just to push that link to them. And lo and behold, that podcast got looked at by all sorts of non-ringing folk who were in the heritage sector. So whole new audience again. Not hard at all, very easy to do. Oh, Jane Wilkinson.
Yeah, again, Jane Wilkinson, Cambridge. Complimenting really what Kate was doing when she was, I can't remember Kate, whether it was when you were president or when you were PR chairman. PR. But we had a list in the PR committee after Kate with all the diocesan PROs. We sent round, you will remember, I don't know if it's still going, but there was a booklet, a rather good booklet, called Bells in Your Care. Is it still going?
Sorry, we just spoke about it a minute ago. Maybe I wasn't speaking slowly and clearly enough.
May I finish?
Yes, you
We
may.
sent it round to all the diocesan secretaries. It did asking them if they could put it in their diocesan mailing. We had some success. It wasn't comprehensive. We knew it wouldn't be comprehensive, but it did go round to all the diocesan secretaries. If you check with your diocesan secretary, they may even, if they're old hand and have been around for 10 years or so, have had it and done something with it. I hope they did, but it may well be time to do it again.
Thank you, Jane. I see David Grimwood and then Ruth Marshall.
Thank you. David Grimwood from Kent. A reference to the clerical guild may become awake. So, it's all very well sending stuff round to officials and offices and leaders, but they get deluged with this stuff every day, including local clergy. So actually it's worth doing, maybe, but actually it's down to each of us to forge links with our own clergy, because not all clergy have bells in their care, and they may not even be that involved when they do. So it's actually down to individuals to make approaches to their clergy. And I don't like to say it, but there were some articles in the Ring World, the last one of which actually tells you what to say to the clergy. Because you have to understand it from their point of view, at the other side of the counter. So it's down to all of us to approach clergy, not to rely on massive circulations.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Ruth, and then Peter, and then Nick.
Hi, Ruth Marshall of the Scottish Association. One thing we talk about is youth, and then we talk about a bit of a skills gap and a bit of a gap for gathering information. I wonder whether the council should consider perhaps sponsoring some of our youngsters into further education, and therefore you could be looking at engineers, or you could be looking at data analysts, things that would actually be useful to the council for the future, both in their courses and then perhaps in PhD or research that they could do for the council. Just a suggestion.
Absolutely, thank you. And in fact, the Worshipful Company of Founders does something like that. They sponsor people in the founding arts. Peter Wilkinson.
Peter Wilkinson, Chester Diocesan Guild. You mentioned earlier, Chris, about trying to get an input into clergy training through the theological colleges, which hadn't met with a great deal of success, unfortunately, but Von Campbell tried. You do need to be aware that many of the new clergy are coming through the non-stipendiary, self-supporting ministry route, and so on. Many of whom then go on to have responsibility for churches, some of which will have bells. They are mostly trained through diocesan programmes of training. So going back to your church diocese, that would be another aspect of the approach to that, to see if one can get an input through that.
Thank you. And behind you, Nick Elks.
Hi, Nick Elks, Peterborough Guild. My suggestion is that the Central Council could do some internal PR, as in internal in the Ring community, because I have many people in my guild, and I'm sure others do, say, well, what's relevant to the Central Council? I know there's been various articles the last year or two in the Ringing World about particular aspects of what's going on, perhaps a more general article again, basically selling what we do here. There's an awful lot of good work being done here, but the message is not getting across to the majority of the Ring community that, you know, basically what we're about here and what's going on, what all the work groups are doing, and in particular to try and appeal to the younger members of the Ring community. Because I look around the room here, I'm in my late 50s, I'm in the lower 10 percentile of the people here. And it'd be good to see lots more younger members of the Ring community getting involved with the Central Council.
I'll just respond to that and then we'll pause with a lot of running, Lucy, sorry. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I know it's It's baffling, isn't it? And I mentioned this in this podcast I did a few weeks ago, that when I sort of kick around a few bell towers around up and down the country, you've got Central Council publications on bookshelves in the ringing room. You've got a safeguarding notice with Central Council logo on the notice board right there. In the church porch, you've got a Central Council recruitment poster. And somehow all of that is invisible. And that just baffles me. Still Goldsmiths.
Yeah.
Lucy, sorry, can't be told, sorry.
While somebody's just going upstairs, we are all representatives to our guilds and associations. What messages are we going back to our areas with? Sorry, that's exactly incorrect.
Are we representatives from our guilds and associations?
Hello, Will Bosworth, Ring World, although I'm not representing them.
Both ways,
Can I ask what the Council's 2020 plans are on the direct membership front, please?
Yes, sorry.
Which was such a key thread of the CRAG recommendations.
So, first thing, first thing really is evidence gathering. You have a feasibility study. I've got some ideas, Phil Barnes has got some ideas, Alison Everett's got some ideas about what the offer looks like, what services, what benefits would a Friends of Ringing subscription look like, what would you get for your money, and then how would you price that, and then what do we do with any income that we get from that, and what projects would we fund, etc., etc. So there's a yin and a yang to that, and I think it'll require a bit of test marketing to see what the appetite is for that. Now, interestingly, was it you or Simon speaking to another London ringer about should there be a package deal for... Yeah, okay. So it's going to be a bit of fact-finding, Will, to start with, and see what the appetite of the community is. I mean, we've had these conversations before about how cheap our hobby is. Should people be prepared to, spend a bit more and get something of, more value, so we can develop services if we had, a stronger income stream. Whether we make that a subscription fee or whether it's just by donation, a giving program, those kind of things. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comments, and any other comments during the break would be very welcome. Do we need to talk quickly about item 13? Because item 13 just follows on from item 12, which is the forecast. Do you want to talk about that really quickly, or no? You're done? No. Do you want to go on? All right, he says it's tea time. So we're going to have tea time. Come back at 3:15, please. We'll get started. Now, it's not on the agenda, but I have an item of lost property here. A mobile phone left in the ladies' loo, so if anybody's missing their phone. Okay, so a bit of order, please. Thank you. Now we're back at lucky item 13. And is that yours? Okay. Financial update for 2019 and outline general fund. So I'll pass to Andy Smith again for this item, please. We're on item 13, which is found on page 35 of your bundle.
Thank you, Christopher. First time we've presented such a paper in accordance with the new governance rules, but we earlier in the agenda received the accounts for 2018, so that's the historical bit. But now we need to look to the present and to the future. So we have a very short paper, as Christopher said, on page 35, which first of all gives you a brief update on 2019, the current financial year. And the left-hand box on page 35, lower half, left-hand side, is the general fund budget for 2019 that was agreed by the executive back in November 2018. A couple of points to note from that when we set the budget, we knew we had Ring and Remember's money coming forward, and we also agreed to some one-off work group expenditure that might be considered to be in excess of what you might call a normal year, if we've had a normal year yet. Against that budget, which, as I said, was approved by the executive in November 2018, I'm not expecting, as the report says, any huge variation. It's still predicated on the Ring and Remember's project money being spent this year, although that might fall over a bit more into 2020. We'll have to take a view on that. I'm still expecting that once-off work group expenditure to occur. There's one or two slight underspends on other things, but I do expect that budget, which was deliberately set with a deficit, to bring us back to balances on the general fund of around about 132,000, which was the same level as December 2017. So surplus in 2018, if you remember the accounts I presented earlier, a bit of a deficit in 2019 to bring us back to roughly the same point over those 2 years. We also, as part of good governance now, need to consider a budget for 2020 on the general fund. This hasn't, there's a timing issue here in terms of me needing to say something to this meeting, but we won't be formally considering the 2020 budget as an executive until our meeting in late October or early November. So this is very much my view at the moment, and you'll notice that I'm giving an illustration of a balanced budget, i.e. no deficit or a surplus, and taking forward, for instance, affiliation fees at much the same level as we've received up to now. The council meeting, I'm assuming that the transactions again will go mostly through the Central Council's books, but that's a matter of sorting out with the Nottingham people. So this is just my view, no consultation yet. And you'll notice 28,000 income, illustrative income, 30,000 illustrative expenditure. That will be the sort of level we would expect. We would expect to have a deficit on the actual meeting where the affiliation fees fund part of that. Work group expenditure, I'm assuming that we've gone through the once-off phase and we're back to a little bit more business as usual. But there's several times, about 6 times at the bottom right-hand side, subject to further formal consultation. So that's my mechanism. That's my defence mechanism for saying, I've put this down on a piece of paper, this is my view, but I haven't talked to anybody yet. But we'll do that when we get to October, November time. So, update in terms of this year, bringing levels of balances back down to where we were a couple of years ago, and an outline budget which does need further consultation and consideration, and finally approval by the executive. So again, happy to take any questions with the paper presented really for information.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions for Andy on this item? Nick Elks?
Nick Elks, Peterborough Guild. Perhaps I'm not quite understanding the account. It says 132,000 to carry forward to future years, whereas in the Treasurer's report you said total funds 444,000.
What we're considering here on the paper before you on page 35 is the general fund, which is just part of that overall 440,000. Remembering, and again I've made a quick reference to it in the paper, we have other funds such as the Bell Restoration Fund, the Fred Jukes Bell Fund, the Education Fund, Library Fund and Publications. So what we're talking about here is the general fund, which is a subset of the whole.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Any other questions for Andy? Thank you. So this isn't anything for... Oh, sorry, Richard Olsen. Thank you.
Richard Olsen, Nature Society of Colleges. I remember when on the admin committee we were talking about increases of the affiliation fees. I've noticed it's £40 for next year. What is the current increase plan?
There's no proposal to change those fees from several years ago. It was £30 per member. Back when Taylor got through, I think it was at the Edinburgh meeting, being increased to £40. There's no proposal to change that in the foreseeable future.
So we were talking about plans to, say, increase every other year or something, just on a regular basis rather than ad hoc.
Well, we need to establish the need to do that. The need hasn't been established. So it's one of those things that gets reviewed periodically.
Thank you, Richard. John Harrison. We've got another microphone.
Yeah. Would you like me to speak very loudly? Richard's referred to previous discussions in the admin committee where we agonised for many years over finances and affiliation fees. The other thing that we did consider in the admin committee, I can't remember the exact dates, but which we put on ice pending CRAG and reforms coming along, was the proposal to put the affiliation fees onto a more equitable basis so that we don't have, say, ODG paying £7 a member and the smallest guilds paying about £1 a member, but to make it more proportional. I'd have thought that having got through the first phase of reform, now was a good time, and having got at the moment a stable condition, that would be a good time to consider whether we can put the fees onto a more reasonable basis, especially given some of the small societies were considering, I think one of them actually has, disaffiliating because this was one of the factors.
You refer to the size of the affiliation fee versus the size of the guild or association. It's £40 per member, but remembering that the number of members that each association is entitled to is in proportion to the size of that association.
It varies, but it's not proportional.
Well, there is a measure. The Oxford Guild, for example, is a very large guild and has 4 or 5 members. The Dorset County, 6, even 6. We've got 6. The Dorset County is a smaller one and only has 1.
I'm talking, having done the calculation from real membership numbers, so I do know what the cost per member is.
Thank you, John. We'll take that on advice and build that into our considerations. Thank you. Jackie.
Jackie Brown, University of London. Would you consider a reduction for university societies?
Again, that's an idea we can consider.
Yes, that has come up in other papers as well as a subsidy. And John, by the way, I don't think that disaffiliation is to do with 40 quid. No. That's not about 40 quid.
As a member of the society, I did see some of the correspondence before the decision was being made. It was one of the factors that was floated. It probably may not be the primary reason, but what do we get for our money is a useful thing to sit to citizens and families.
Yeah, thank you. James.
James Champion, South African Guild. I don't know whether
when John was talking about the society that was thinking of disaffiliating, whether he had ours in mind, but I know that pardon?
No.
No, oh well. But I know that whenever the subject of raising the affiliation fee comes up, that prompts discussions in my society about whether to remain affiliated.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, thank you.
Because we have a particular problem of a very volatile currency. No,
yep.
Not that the UK doesn't these days. But in South Africa, we constantly do.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. That's a good point, James. Thank you. Okay, any more on item 13, please? Great, thanks very much. There's nothing to receive or adopt or vote on there, it's just for information. We come to some elections. Always nice if there's a contested election, makes it a bit interesting, doesn't it? This year we don't have a contested election. Very sad. We have one nominee for the office of President, Simon Linford. Now, supporting statements are already there in the bundle. If you look on page 4, you'll see those. And got some excellent press in the Ringing World Letters column about it. I ask the proposer and seconder to come forward. Go on.
Philip Barnes, Kent County Association and Ordinary Trustee. I'm delighted to propose Simon Linford for the post of President of the Central Council, and I'm even more delighted that he accepted the suggestion that he should stand. As I leave, he starts. I don't think those are
That's why I think this current format works quite well, and it should be an encouragement for reps to come along.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. I'll pass to Mary Bone, who has some items of other business. Any other business before I pass to Mary? Okay. Mary Bone, what have you got?
Right, sorry about this. First, I've got some thank yous. I'd like to thank Carol, Carol Franklin, who kindly produced the sheets for the attendance roll again this year. I have an enormous thank you to Fred, who once again typeset the annual meeting papers booklet. It is a not inconsiderable amount of work, involving a fair amount of certain language at times. Not to mention sort of last minute changes and things like that to meet the deadlines. And obviously I'd like to thank Sue, who's credited for the front cover image, which then got reused a certain amount of times. Now, we had a comment from Chris over there about not getting the information, and I know that we had a glitch earlier this year when the wrong email address was given to us for a new representative. If you change your contact details, particularly your email address, we're still not psychic. And we do need to know, and we're very happy, Doug and I work closely together to make sure that people are on the all members mailing list. If you haven't had a recent message from me about this meeting or a message from David about this meeting, you should be screaming loudly as to why hadn't you heard anything. And if you know that somebody who isn't here didn't hear anything, make sure that they tell us who they are and that we can contact them and they can contact us. And if you could also check that your guild secretary or guild contact is receiving central council emails, because there's a separate societies mailing list as well. As Doug said, please return the evaluation forms. You can return them tomorrow if you want. If you're leaving now, return them this afternoon, return them this evening if you're going off after the dinner, but do please fill them in and return them. There's a box down there just beyond the table where Robert is sitting, I think. Is that right? And it's labelled. Yeah. And we would like all lanyards and badge holders back as well, please, either now or after the dinner. If you're staying for the mini roadshow tomorrow, obviously if you're engaged in the roadshow tomorrow, your swing badge will be coloured appropriately. If you're just going to attend the mini roadshow tomorrow, you'll get a different kind of admission symbol. But we could try and keep the expenditure for these meetings down to a minimum if we can, and reusing badges and lanyards from year to year is part of it. Right, now we get on to the really serious and boring stuff. The deadline for both nominations and motions is 6 weeks before the meeting, which will be held on Saturday the 5th of September. Nominations will be required for President, because Simon serves the remainder of Christopher's term. For Deputy President, because that term of office would expire anyway and was laid down in the transition motion. For Treasurer, because Andy has indicated that although the transition motion said that he should stay on until 2021, that he would actually like to depart next September. And every year we elect up to 2 independent examiners. Well, ideally 2 as specified in the rules and standing orders. Now, as stated last year under AOB, but obviously not necessarily attended to by everybody, and as mentioned earlier, all affiliation fees must be paid and membership numbers of societies notified 6 weeks before the meeting, the same as the nomination and motion deadline, or you will not be able to speak or vote. We have already had to ask somebody not to exercise that right this year. Please make sure that your guild secretaries and treasurers understand this and also act on it. Andy and I spent a considerable amount of time this year chasing people, and basically we've got other things to do at this time of year, and we'd rather not chase, and we probably won't be doing that again. So if you want to be able to speak and vote, just make sure that they get their act together and pay up the money and send in the membership number. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I get really scared sitting next to Mary, and I hope you're scared too.
Is there secretaries and treasurers who ought to be scared?
Yeah. I'd like to say a few thank yous at this point. The end is in sight, don't worry. I would like to thank, over the time that I've been President, all my fellow officers and executive trustees. You've been incredible, and the work that you put in, the hours that you put in, the expertise that you bring to the table is much appreciated. To the workgroup members and the workgroup leads for all the work that you do in providing amazing services to the ringing community at large. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And I think you've all heard, that there's some good work being done, some good work that needs to be done. Do please step forward to help with that. In particular and I'd like to thank, all of you here. The quality and the calibre of debate that we've had today has been really very, very positive, very helpful indeed. So more of that, please. It's really good. In terms of the event this weekend, so many people have done so much to make it a success. So my particular thanks to David Kirkcaldy and Clyde Whitaker for leading on that and bringing together a team of helpers, the stewards, all those who've been on the welcome desk, on the reception desk, people who are running workshops, people who've got stalls outside, those who have been tower stewards, tower key holders, so many people, a small army of people, to the tech team, Doug, Dave, etc., and to the Goldsmiths staff as well for putting on a wonderful event. So I wonder if we could put our hands together for all of those, please. So that's that. I think I declare the meeting.
Mr. President, could I interrupt you? I think it would be appropriate. I think it would contribute. I'm going to interrupt you, sir, because I think it's appropriate in the absence of a traditional greeting from the incoming President, Simon, who couldn't be with us today, to thank you for your time in office, Christopher. You took over and you successfully steered the changes to the council constitution last year, and have since then been steering the new executives and work groups forward in a very changed council, and we've already seen considerable progress. We're sorry that you have to go back to Australia and won't see out the other year, but I think on behalf of council members and indeed ringers as a whole, we should thank you for all the work you've done and wish you well for the future.
What a problem past presidents can be. Chris has just stepped straight into what I was going to say. The one person that hadn't had any thanks so far tonight is Christopher. We'd like to thank Christopher for the hard work he's put in, not just as Vice President, President, seeing through the changes that we've started down a road on, but doing it with his typical Australian sense of diplomacy, tact and humour. And so to mark his departure back, because I'm not quite sure what the quality of liquid is in Australia. There's just a little token of their appreciation. Thank you very much.
Marvellous.
We've seen him in action with that on Skype calls.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a bit of a theme, isn't there, with Nigel and Robert, and it's all happening today, isn't it? Wowee. There was a little garden party I attended a couple of months ago near Regent's Park, and I had the opportunity to say something about what a privilege it is, a privilege to be a ringer, and a privilege to serve the ringing community in this way. So my thanks to you. Thank you. Oh, they say I can declare it closed now. Hey! 3.5 hours.
What's the time?
Oh, and could I have an update on the cricket, please, Peter?
Australia, 63 for 4.
Ooh.
What's that, 4:13? And see them all back here for the service.
And